And actually, I'm going to hit the summary too. And I'm going to kick us off. So yeah, this is, I'm excited about this session. I apologize if we tried to join last week because I screwed up and we didn't get it done, but Brandon was generous enough to come back and try again this week. I don't know if anybody, did you guys, I know Dave was there for a little while. Anybody play with the Cascadia Summit that happened about a month ago now? Anybody come for a while? It was really good. It was really fun. They did kind of about 2 weekends, I guess, and a week of activity following a bunch of face-to-face events. There's a lot of energy, a lot of activity, and I felt like progress. And it just seemed like a great example of what we would love to be seeing happening all over the world. So I thought this was a chance to get Brandon to come talk to us about, kind of the whole story. I'd love to start with like how you guys, how this came about, what you guys did, and then where you think you're going with it now, kind of the whole trajectory. But of course, we can have conversation as well. But Brandon, I thought I would just turn it over to you, and please, if you would introduce yourself and like how the heck you ended up, in this chair, and then talk to us about the work in Cascadia.
Yeah, that's great. Well, firstly, thanks for having me here. Just waking up this morning, so still drinking my first cup of coffee. So I'll probably get more engaging as we go. And I don't have any type of formal presentation, so I really would love to turn it into more of a dialogue and a discussion. To give a little bit of introduction, I see some people that I've met before and, briefly or whatnot. But yeah, so this idea of Regenerate Cascadia came from, I think, several earlier events. I think an event that both Claire and I were at was the 2022 Regenerative Communities Global Summit that they did in 2022. And then also then Claire and I, who's kind of the co-administrator of Regenerate Cascadia, actually met in the Salmon Nation Intern Collective Edge Prize, which was hosted on Hilo earlier this year. And it gathered about 140 different people from around Cascadia and Salmon Nation to come together and meet and explore different regenerative projects. And so out of these events, a few different design challenges kind of emerged that we wanted to address. And I think the biggest were that you get these like large global one-time summits. But especially with the global summit, one of the things that we saw was that it lacked a connection to place. And so we really wanted to explore what would happen if you take these like large, really gatherings that can energize people and then root it into a bioregion, where it's the largest sense of scale, where the physical connections can make sense and that people can actually meet and talk and go to different communities, and where a lot of these discussions and the people you're meeting with make sense. The other part I think that emerged is, how do you keep the energy and momentum going out of both the Edge Prize and Global Summit? We recognize that it's just like you get these like moments of amazing connection and energy, but quite often they're put on by small teams that are under-resourced, and all the energy goes into putting on the event, but very little energy goes into how we're co-creating it together, or the huge process of the documentation and proceedings that come after it. So we kind of really wanted to explore, how do we co-create the pathways to these summits, these one-time events, and then how do we co-create the pathways back down into the valleys where we're actually spending our day-to-day time and doing the work that needs to be done. And so for us, we came up with this idea of Regenerate Cascadia. My co-administrator for the project is named Claire Atwell. So I'm in Seattle, Washington, which is in the United States in the Sailor Sea. And Claire, my co-administrator, is in Victoria, also in the Sailor Sea, but in Canada. And so it's just, it was just a really wonderful meeting and gathering. And we really wanted to bring people together to start these conversations also about how do we inspire and activate regenerative work happening in our region. I think through the Edge Prize, something else that really emerged is that people are out in the communities doing the work, but they're not necessarily aware of each other, connected, and a lot of them lack the resources that they need. And so we also really wanted to explore, how do we help visualize, connect? How do we remove ourselves as bottlenecks and then see people supported and resourced in the ways that they need. And so we came up with this idea. Claire Atwell, through Earth Regenerators and through this new emerging design school for regenerating Earth, had actually already invited Joe to come to Victoria. He had just given a series of talks in the Great Lakes on kind of these, calling them bioregional activation tours. And so we invited him here to Cascadia to come and give a series of talks. And we decided to do it for about 30 days. And so working with different communities and organizing teams that kind of emerged. And so from October 1st through 30th, we had 5 of us, Joe, Penny, and Stephen Morris from the Design School for Regenerating Earth, Claire Atwell, myself, and then several other people who joined us for the tour. And we traveled to 14 different communities where we hosted talks, presentations, and field trips where we toured different regenerative communities and projects in different areas. And what we found was that there's just such an abundance of amazing work happening. And when you're there and when you're seeing it, it is deeply inspiring, energizing, and it really helps get people active and involved when they can really have that hands-on component. And so kind of meeting in person let us help set context and come together. And then so yeah, we had an amazing activation tour. We worked with about 140 people organizing in these 14 different places. What we found, the types of people that came out were incredible. It was the people who were doing the regenerative projects, that leading these communities. At certain stops we would have, and what was really nice is we would work with people and over organizations, but because of that, the connections to different organizations, groups, and communities was so rich and so strong. And we really focused on creating relationships and helping build trust. And by working with places where people were really energized and engaged with the projects that we were doing, it helped us set kind of a level of coherence and shared context, which I think is really important. And so in each of these communities, we talked about what a Regenerate Cascadia program could look like, or organization could look like. What does each community need? And then what are the lessons in each community happening that are working and that are inspiring and that people are most passionate and exciting about? So to cap all of that off, we wanted to have a 10-day summit and unconference, and we rapidly scaled that back to more of a one weekend where we focused on a festival of what works that got to be a capstone for our bioregional activation tour. We had about 40 different presentations from the community with, like, as we went, getting to share some of these amazing lessons about what we were learning. And the other thing that we really realized is that quite often the issues facing each community in a region are incredibly similar, whether it's water tables, whether it's access to affordable housing, whether it's land degradation, forest management practices, helping bring together eco-villages, and especially a focus on intergenerational learning, bioregional learning exchanges. And each different community had different tactics that they were doing. Each different community had places and things that they were doing really well, but no one community had the answer. And so I think that there's a lot of opportunity to really connect people together around these lessons, and especially, communities of between the San Juan Islands, Vashon Island, Whidbey Island, and the Gulf Islands in Canada, right? They're the same island chains. The issues they face are the same, but they're not connecting. And quite often these issues are focused down to the specific island they might be on. So by bringing together this greater cooperation, it's kind of a niche that we were able to offer, which was very cool. And then at the summit, that first weekend, really let people share the lessons and connect together to meet each other for the first time. Because when we were on the tour, we got to meet all of these incredible people, but then we got to open it up, remove ourselves as bottlenecks, and let people connect together. And I think that was very inspiring too, for people and the connections they made. And then we opened it up during the week. We had a watershed organizers retreat for people who helped organize the tour during the week. And then the final weekend, we opened up as, we called it an unconference, an open space. But really it was to let people come together and organize around issues that they felt was important. And so that helped also give ownership and engagement, and then help guide our path for what came next. And so since then, we've been looking at how do we connect people together and create a community. And our main and primary goal is we're kind of working through two different models. One are kind of watershed hubs with the goal of creating these watershed congresses in each area. And then the other is these bioregional guilds, where we get communities of topic experts together that can weave people across watersheds. So the idea is both learning and restoration within a landscape, but also sharing lessons across landscapes. And a big shift in focus that we also want to do is to break down the isolated nature. Quite often, regenerative projects and communities can feel isolated. In the Edge Prize, one of the big lessons that we learned was that sometimes you have regenerative projects and communities that have been working on something, and they're leading the way in the same community, maybe a mile apart from each other, but they've never heard of each other and they're not aware of each other. So even just connecting them together is so vitally important. And when you do that, and when you start to shift the thinking from every little patch of land and project, and instead start thinking on holistic landscape scales, where we can start talking about the true regenerative scale and work that we need to be doing, it really shifted the focus. So really getting people together across these different silos, breaking down the silos, and getting people to work and talk together and start that collaborative planning on these larger scales, I think is one of the big things that we're really exploring. And then lastly, I think is that idea of how do we get people funded and supported, and how much stronger even just their applications can be, whether it's financing or applying for grants, when you bring people together, when you have a collection of 11 projects working together, rather than just everybody in their silo, every project working competitively and feeling very stressed. So yeah, that's a little rundown, I think, of some of the things we did. And
yeah, well, my take was you did really well. I'll ask the first question, but I'd love to have other people dive in, and I'm going to ask the nerdy one. It felt to me like you use technology really well. I mean, like, your website's really good, and you've got a ton of really good YouTube content, kind of organized in a way that's useful. And I'm hating it, but you're very active on Telegram, telephone. I don't know. So talk a little bit about the tech stack and how you were able to pull it off.
Sure. Well, I think it's been a learning process. I wasn't aware of Telegram before starting Regenerate Cascadia, so a lot of really fast learning curves, I think. Same thing actually with Miro boards. Miro boards was introduced by people at our summit, and I had never seen them or used them before. But yeah, so just to give a mention about the technology. So I think everything that we created, because I think technology is really important for weaving us together. We have tools now that are incredible for collaboration and working. And I think what we did was to pair the technology to the function of what we needed, and always keep it rooted to what do people actually need to connect, and then not trying to replace any type of community function. I always took it back to, there's a guy named Henning, who is an 89-year-old permaculture farmer on Lopez Island who barely has internet, but he runs their local transition group. He is never going to join Telegram. He's never going to join our website. He will join Zoom, he got there. But so I always take it back to what does Henning need? And even if Henning can't join our Zoom, how can we still connect what we're doing to the people who need it in our work, and help connect and collaborate with them? And I think that's a really important component. So making sure that our work is always connected to the landscape leaders and the people doing the work, and then it's designed to empower them with an understanding that not everybody will use that. And so I think one of the things that we're also structuring into our organization is this idea of core weaving teams that can form an administrative backbone to help provide some of the tech, and thinking almost as like movement as service, where we are providing the technical backend, we are providing onboarding and trainings, and really creating the conditions that allow a regenerative movement to evolve and grow from. And so, I don't think technology, and there can be different purposes and different functions. But what's nice is that when we have watershed hubs and congresses meeting together, they can meet together in person. Whereas bioregional guilds that are meeting with people from all over the bioregion will necessarily have to have a little bit of a tech component. I think for our technology that we used, so we used Telegram for actually, like when we were organizing. We also used a website, and with the website, we kept it very simple, but we organized people by place and interest. And that also became the watershed hubs and the bioregional guilds. We did so kind of creating a bioregional directory. And then also that integrated, we were very inspired by Ben Roberts and the Regenerative Communities map that they did for their RCN Summit in 2022. They used Kumu. And so, but they still had, the way that they were doing it was, I think they used some app, but they have to do a lot of manual like messing with it. And at first we're like, oh, we need map stewards and all the rest of it. But then with WordPress, we were able to explore integrating, trying to automate it a little bit more. So whenever anybody signed up for the website, they chose their location, they chose their whatever. And we were able to map that into Kumu automatically. So we're also building a social movement map. We're trying to also use WordPress to build that bioregional directory and give people tools. And then for the actual tour itself, we had a Telegram group where we threaded it so that there were different organizing groups around, around interests, but also different locations had their own thread. And so we're able to organize together. And they could use email, they could use their own thing, but the Telegram was kind of our central branch. And it was really interesting because there was certainly, I think, a generational gap between who, I guess, would use Telegram. And so one of the ways that we also helped kind of orient people and get people involved was that we had weekly info sessions where we would help set the context, share what we're doing, and then also have onboarding for how people could get involved. And when we actually traveled, that Telegram thread became really important. It would be like a rolling wave where, when we were in Whidbey or Eugene, that was our way of communicating, and everybody could see it. And what's nice then is that people were able to learn from each other as we traveled. So the people who took on the first few stops, specifically, Kiala and Atlan, Eugene, Lost Valley, and then going up to Portland, they kind of took the brunt of getting to learn what an activation tour was, what is the presentation, how do we talk about it. But what's nice is everybody else on the Telegram group was able to watch those communications, get a feel for what it looked like, and then also learn how to talk about it. So the tour got more powerful as it traveled. It got more well-spoken. We learned how to talk about it and how to communicate about it. People were able to write articles and communications out about it more effectively. And then for the actual summit itself, we brought people together using 2 Zoom rooms. We used the website as our primary gathering place. And so we had all the events listed. We had a calendar. And then at any time, people could always go to the websites, get the tools they needed to do that. And then since then, we've been using Telegram, and Miro boards have been wonderful, integrating it with a drive. And then we're transforming the website basically to have 3 functions. We're building in, so it's a WordPress multi-site. So our idea is that we can have a central hub for Regenerate Cascadia on a backend, but then we can build a template that's replicable that goes out. So when there's a Regenerate Whidbey, a Regenerate Eugene, a Regenerate the Salish Sea, we will populate new websites. It's as easy as hitting like a duplicate button. They have the plugins that they need. When a new group wants a plugin, we can buy it and it gets access to the whole thing. So we kind of have a built-in tech collective that's sharing the resources on that top level. And then those front-end websites interface with the public. So those are front-end, kind of, we're calling them movement portals, but they're the front door between the public and getting that information on a website so it doesn't remain in a back-end silo. It's a problem that a lot of people have with social media networks or resources not being available, where you go try to find it later and you can't find it. But if people have a lot of issues with like Mighty Networks or other groups or Facebook or other things with that being searchable or findable. So providing places where it's organized, it's a digital memory, and is really important. And then I think the other parts of the website that are really important is a space for organizer tools, so that everybody can find onboarding and know how to organize, how, you know, what is a watershed hub? What is a bioregional guild? How do you start one? What is some of the governance for how we make decisions together? How do you add an event to the calendar so that it can go out to everything? And what's nice is by doing the multi-site, we can connect a sub-site to the main site, have an integrated calendar feed, have an integrated blog feed, so that when one is updated, so is the other. And then the third part is the community. And there's a lot of different community tools already out there, and it felt like a lot of them did a lot of what we wanted. None of them did quite everything. And so we are creating a space in the back end where we will have groups able to steward spaces. People can join, there can be messaging, and then they can curate their own resources, calendar, and other things there. So we're really trying to create the conditions and tools that anyone might need, and just ways that we can visualize, talk, and connect to each other.
Cheers, man. Nicely done.
Can I ask a question? It's really inspiring and very cool how it's developing, and just, you know, it's excellent. Can you just say more about the guilds and the watershed hubs, and just like not only like I guess you've mentioned like you can, it's by location and so forth, but are there specific kind of responsibilities or domains or focuses, and how do they organize, or is it mainly that, you know, the communication threads and things? Just a bit more around sort of that organizational structure that seems to be evolving.
Well, these are great questions and answers that are emerging as we speak. And kind of as we're working together, we're trying to really figure out what is a watershed hub, what is a bioregional guild. And, you know, who knows, those names might change, but they're just kind of working titles that let us talk about things. The most important thing, so to give an example, several groups have formed around specific topics that people are really passionate and interested about. Some examples would be, and what we're doing is we're looking to find a few groups of each of these that can really, that like probably have the most active leadership teams, and we call them stewardship councils or stewardship teams. But we're looking for where those are the strongest, and then using a few to model what is a guild and what is a hub, so that we can be learning a little bit about this, be building our structure and be building in the resources before we spread this out for a lot of other people or the public to start filtering into. To give examples, some of the three, like the main bioregional guilds that have emerged is, the first one was a Cascadia Seed Guild. So we have really amazing leaders in permaculture living here and seed collection. And specifically, we've connected with a lot of seed saving groups and organization and guilds in the Cascadia bioregion. So specifically in the Willamette Valley, in Eugene, and then also the organizers for the Sailor Sea Guild. We have people like Vicki Robbins and Penny Livingston on Whidbey Island. And we have like Forrest Schumer on Port Townsend, who have been doing this work for decades, from prairie to other types of seed collecting. And so they're getting together to form a seed saving guild. And then we're trying to figure out what that looks like. And our idea is that we have a basic organizer DNA for some basic requirements. And that the part of starting a stewardship team is taking on certain responsibilities and accountabilities. So some of those responsibilities might be things like making sure that events are getting added to the calendar, making sure that there's an email goes out, stewarding a community space, having a space where you can share resources together. And then I think there's a few broader things that we want to include that are just kind of nice things to think about, which are coming and attending a regular bioregional update session where we can take the updates from each different group and be sharing them back. And so the stewardship team not only exists as like an administrative backbone for that group, but it also serves as a feedback loop. It's like, you know, closing the loop and bringing the information and knowledge and lessons back to the main group, which makes it visible and accessible so that new people can get involved and see what's happening. And then I think there's other things that we want bioregional guilds to do, which is to create things like educational materials and onboarding. So if it's a seed guild, one of the things that they can do is create a seed saving 101, which we can bring back. And I think we use like a LearnDash through WordPress, but they can actually create a course which becomes free where all members of Regenerate Cascadia can get access to a seed saving 101 thing. And then they can also have a community space that they can get involved with. Other examples are things like a bioregional mapping guild, where it's really people focused on the mapping side of it, bringing people together around that, creating informational commons, and as well as bioregional maps. There is a bioregional education group that emerged, very strong, very powerful, really exploring intergenerational learning and then learning exchanges between watersheds, and how do we bring people together, and then really pulling in youth, and how do we provide pathways to regenerative education that can help see people paid, supported, provide pathways for young people to actually have a future in regenerative work, and what does that look like, as well as place-based curriculum and learning. Another guild that formed was, there's like a Web3 and technology group that's exploring some of these broader governance platforms and other things that might be useful for people. And then in terms of the groups, we're working with 2 right now to help us form a watershed hub. And that is Regenerate Whidbey Island. They were one of the strongest places that we have. They have a sign up. We had about 115 people that they had sign up that came to the presentation and wanted to be involved and all the rest of that. And then the other one is Regenerate Whatcom, where they have a great leadership group already that's kind of built out through earlier transition groups and other things. And but are really in a position where to take a leadership role. And so working with those 2 groups, we're looking at what is a Regenerate hub. And I think specifically, not just, what are they going to be doing, but what sets the Regenerate group apart from a lot of other existing groups. And it really is about weaving together the work that's already being done, not necessarily reinventing the wheel, and helping shift those patterns and thinking and frameworks to that landscape level. And then ultimately, what we're trying to do in the back end at some point is to create a bioregional regeneration fund, which can help shift capital flows to those landscape leaders, and help fund projects as defined by those landscape leaders themselves. So, helping, there's a lot of discussion, but a lot of it's very abstract. It's kind of larger level, and it's not actually connected in with the landscape leaders. And so we really want to help build a bridge, which can help connect those people in the larger kind of realms of people who are talking about regenerative finance, and then connect them with those landscape leaders who actually need the work, and then scale up our capacities. Because that was also a thing that really emerged, is we do not have the capacity and scale, and we don't have the governance in place, and the shared frameworks and language to work together collaboratively right now. So we really need to build that and share that. And and each place is at different processes and probably has different angles that could work together really well. But starting to grow that cohesive element on those scales is really going to be really important.
Brandon, thank you so much. That's so detailed and wonderful. It reminds me I come from sort of more of a classical organization background, but it reminds me of the work in collective impact. Like that whole collective governance, collective impact stuff is where you have different organizations finding ways to work together on system problems, and they come across, these need for backbone, support and so forth. And if there's anything that I think is useful, I'll just post it in the chat. So thank you.
Wonderful.
I'll go ahead and ask Brandon. So your comment about how transitions was kind of building muscle for the summit and the Regenerate Cascadia makes me wonder a little bit about how do you see kind of quote regeneration in the movement path, and what else is there that you're kind of, I don't know, bringing together, and what are you missing? Do you have any intuitions for?
Yeah, I mean, so it's really interesting. I mean, I think one of the big things in why an activation tour was really powerful now, honestly, is that a lot of groups, I think, were really devastated by COVID. And I think they didn't, I think we are all collectively just emerging from that. I know it's been a year or 2 years now since really the main thing, but I think that there's an incredible amount of grief, trauma, but even just in terms of the social fabric and work that had been building for decades, just we're not meeting in person in the same way that we were. And I think that there is an intense desire and hunger to meet with each other in person, not on Zoom, not on whatever. And Zoom is important. A lot of our meetings happen on Zoom. But also just to build back a little bit of the ritual and connection with each other around, gathering around fires, music, food. And so not just like the work component, but also the social and cultural component for rebuilding regenerative culture. And so I think people are really hungry for it. And then also I would say that I think for a lot of people, there's a real sense of isolation, quite frequently, that people doing the work feel very alone in the places that they are, and they don't feel connected with other people. And that's a real big struggle. And what's nice is to see is when you actually talk about regenerative work and when you connect people together like this, it is exciting and it is inspiring, and it just like fires people up in ways that I think people are looking for. So yeah, so all that to say that I think that, Regenerate Cascadia, more than just a movement to, connect work together, is also about how do we learn and play together. What are those, like, how do we come together and get to grow and build as people as well, and start like not only like the collective healing, but also there's a lot of, I think, personal work that goes into that as well. I'll also just add that I think one of the things that makes Cascadia unique is that this work has been happening for a very long time. And in each community that we visited, we had elders from the bioregional movement join us in every single place, people who have been active for decades. And to see how excited they were able to get and how involved. So we did a lot of interviews. We did a lot of video interviews as we traveled. And so I think being able to connect it into a broader movement, that really where that groundwork has been laid, and where these people are still active, was also really powerful, and also helped give us a little bit of guidance and framework, and getting to connect in with that early movement and then share some of those lessons is going to be really important too.
Brandon, that stimulated me to wonder about involving some of the elders. I'm in Spokane, so we're sort of the Cascadia watershed. And we're starting a city project here with the city of Spokane. But one of the things that I've been hearing is that the elders in Spokane have been involved in mostly master gardening. That's sort of the pocket that has involved people in plants and that kind of stuff, not so much water. And the water folks are kind of quite separate from that, and they're more getting rid of excess water and purifying water, that kind of stuff. They don't really understand the connection between soil and water that I've been able to discover. But there seems to be a resistance in the Master Gardener group from stepping outside of that and seeing the landscape, that they're really focused on gardens, not seeing landscapes at all. Did you see that issue, and how did you address that in other places that you've been?
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, I think that's a really common issue, and breaking down the silos and really focusing. I think there's a few different ideas that we used as kind of our organizing principles. And you do have a pro-social, you do have a bioregional, but one of the big ones too is whole systems thinking. And you cannot take any of these issues in isolation. And I think it's really hard. I think what we learned too is that it's really important to work with people who are leaned in to these ideas, because it's very hard to convince people otherwise. And it's really funny too, because you get people who've been doing the work, especially I think in a traditional nonprofit setting, there is quite often a feeling like we're already doing the work, we already know it all, and we're already working with everybody who's there is to work with. And quite often it could never be further from the truth. And but when people have that attitude, it's very hard to break kind of through that. But what works really well is partnering with the people who are already there and already thinking like that, or who are willing to have that conversation. But especially with soil and ecosystem restoration, you know, that touches into so many different things, you know, especially around fires, you know, or water, or you know, all of these different management, you know, strategies, like, and having an integrated approach on that, that can create healthier systems and regenerative systems is so important. And I think that's where also connecting people, not just together in a watershed, is important, but connecting people across watersheds. So connecting with other people who are doing soil sciences and getting to ask them, how did you break through? You know, like, how did you broaden your approach, is really important. And connecting with other people who know the language, who know those specific topics.
Yeah, where the project that we're starting here is focused on the aquifer, because we're on top of an aquifer, and that's something that will, I hope, expand us out of the city also, because the aquifer is a bigger thing and it allows us to talk regionally.
Yeah. I think so. I would actually, I would love it if you invite, like, so right now we're still on Telegram, but we should have a space up. Our hope is to have a kind of a better community space up online and functional by the 1st of January. We're kind of using the new year as our time for that. But if you can, certainly please join our Telegram. And if you can't, that's also okay. But I would recommend that you talk. We have really amazing people who specifically focus on water tables, soil science. So some examples of that would be, so Alpha Low at Lost Valley, you know, he talks a lot about water tables, but also Brian Kirklevitt in Bellingham, he does Inspiration Farms. And then there's quite a few different eco villages and other things, but specifically focusing on this like whole system scale thinking.
Okay. Yeah, we're I'm hoping to work with the mayor. I've gotten permission from her to submit a proposal, which is what I'm in the process of putting together. So I'm trying to collect resources basically to support moving forward, and starting to connect people within the city departments that are functioning with, don't really talk with each other a lot, or they talk independently but don't work together because the structure doesn't really support that.
Yeah, I would very much invite you to just come, because there will be better people than me able to answer that question and share resources.
Okay.
But it would be a wonderful, I think that's exactly the point of the group, is to let people connect and ask questions and share resources. So please be welcome. And I would invite that dialogue and discussion. I think it's great.
Thank you.
I'm going to pop into the chat an amazing, at least I thought it was an amazing webinar that seems related. It was about a living system approach to the city of Los Angeles, but it had sort of this, had lots of overlays that might be of interest. So I'm going to just put that in the chat. You may find that of interest, and Brandon and everyone. It's really a design approach, but it relates to some of the themes that we've talked about here. If there's no question from anyone else, Brandon, just about sort of reaching across sectors, you know, a little bit around what Catherine was kind of getting into. do you find that the kinds of folks that are coming are sort of, you know, that like-minded, like-hearted, you know, that we all feel close to? Or are you finding some wild cards in there that indicate sort of an interest from, you know, unlikely suspects?
Yeah, I would say it depends. It's a little bit of both, but yeah, I would say it was very powerful to see the diversity of people who were engaged with this topic in each area. And what was cool is it was very different in each place, with a lot of threads that kind of were woven together. I think one of the best examples, though, I think, yeah, the different islands are probably the best example, where you already have some collaboration, but they all have different areas of places that they need to work with. But when you start thinking on that landscape scale, it is really cool to see how these connections and breaking down the silos can really like benefit itself. Like on Vashon Island, you know, you got members of different arts nonprofits, you had land trusts, you had like people who had lived on the island and taken over the water commission. You had and then affordable housing was really big. And what's really interesting is you get situations like you have an affordable housing nonprofit that's trying to you know, keep houses you know, affordable. So they're trying to like find spaces to build new housing. And then you have the land trust, which is buying up land, but like specifically not. And then what happens when you actually take the affordable housing nonprofit and connect it with the land trust, and they start talking together? And now all of a sudden you have dialogues where, how do we build affordable housing in a regenerative way that can also be built into nature, not removed from it, right? Where it's actually not detracting from the natural regenerative qualities of that place. And so over and over again, you would see these connections that when people get together and start to talk about that, it just of what can happen. And one of the most powerful examples I think that we saw of that really was in Port Townsend, which is on the Olympic Peninsula here in the Sailor Sea. And just how they have come together, and through regenerative through different, like I think it was their local 2020, but they have just done so much, from like helping to take over utilities to using disaster management and preparedness to really build in resilience, start to build in regenerative futures. But they've also built
algum sucesso.
What's that?
I think it was background.
Okay. But they have also built in like Lion, which is a community financing arm. It doesn't handle any money itself, but it connects investors and donors to different projects that might need it, which has spun up 32 different businesses like Finn River, which now is a site for regenerative projects, and like 19 different groups in the county and in East Jefferson County. And I mean, just like over and over again. And then what's really interesting, though, is Port Townsend, though, has not connected ever with Victoria Island, which is literally right across the water from them, but it's in Canada, right? And if you go to Victoria Island, they have never connected with San Juan Island, even though you can literally like swim to it. But again, one's in Canada, one's in the United States. So the Gulf Islands and San Juan Islands, a collection of 500 islands, they're part of the same island chain, again, divided. And so helping take these lessons and share them across those watersheds, across the scales, is also really powerful. And what was really cool is that being able to connect Gabriola Island, that probably has some of the coolest regenerative conversations that they've had. They did a 12-12-12 conversation series that brought the island together, did all this work, and is incredibly inspiring. And being able to connect that with Vashon Island, who is looking to start that kind of conversation series, was so powerful. And yet Gabriola still gets all of their water brought in on trucks. You know, so that water table issue is so important. And so and Vashon has literally these groups of people who have taken over their water councils to control the policy, so that their landscape policy can extend beyond the borders and boundaries of private property, right? The idea that what we do actually has an impact on the scale of nature. So those are just a couple different examples.
Matthew raised his hand.
Hey, I have a question about your experience and view on crossing over, making connections between the like carbon quantification to financing side of things, and then the like broader social ecological system regeneration.
Matthew, we lost you in the middle there. So much for moving. Somebody took out his port.
Can you hear me
he's
now?
back. Yeah, you're back.
Oh, hey, sorry about that. What was the last thing you heard?
The crossover between carbon financing and kind of more traditional communities and
yeah, and like, you know, this kind of weird thing that injecting black stuff and gas and stuff underground, and then being able to sell that is a thing, but funding a community that's organizing in a social ecological framework isn't, or question mark, is it? And over the next 1 to 5 to 10 years, what do you see as maybe being possible? Are you thinking about that? Or have you come to a place of saying, forget that, you know, they'll come to the table when they're ready?
When you say they'll come to the table, who specifically do you kind of mean?
I guess I would say like offset, the whole offset buyers, brokers, that whole, like all those,
I gotcha.
Microsoft and the Stripe, and, you know, those people spending billions on direct air capture, or, you know, heirloom or whatever.
Right. Yeah, it's really interesting. I think there was a lot of discussion in a lot of different places about things like that. I think Alex Wick has his hand up, and with Cascadia Carbon specifically, could probably actually answer your question directly. And what I will just say is that I think what's nice is it's certainly not my area of expertise, but by bringing people together, you can bring together people who are doing the work to be able to have those conversations. I will say that I think if there was a lot of talk about how issues on a specific thing like carbon can be incredibly damaging, and that we also need to be really recognizing biodiversity and a lot of other different factors for what a healthy planet looks like and what a healthy region looks like. And I think there's a lot of different ways that can kind of take shape. And what's nice is that you can weave people together to really have those conversations. And then there is, I think, also a discussion, which is also how do you connect and build up our capacity and scale to be able to receive funding on the level that we need. One of our guiding questions, you know, because we had invited Joe Brewer in the Design School for Regenerating Earth to come in. He has a very powerful presentation that he gives on the design pathway that we can be building in. And one of the questions that he talks about is kind of this landscape, like leadership and funding model, you know, over 20 years and what it takes in terms of investment in landscape leadership teams. One of the big challenges, though, is he says, you know, if tomorrow, if a watershed, you know, like a watershed was able to get $100 million in funding, are you able to equitably distribute it? And the answer in almost every case is no. We do not have the capacity. We do not have the scale built in yet. We do not have the governance for how we talk to each other. And so, and how we make decisions. And so one of our big, I think, goals is to really start to build those structures in place so that we can have the scale that can be competitive with governments and corporations who are positioned right now to be able to get that money in and continue extractive policies. So how do we really bootstrap and then actually build not just a regenerative movement, but a regenerative culture and economy along with it?
Right. Yeah. You mentioned. Oh, sorry.
Oh, no, please go ahead. I just want to give a warning that in about 3 minutes, I'm going to have to leave. And I do apologize because this is a great conversation that I'd love to have. So, but I do want to jump. Rick, you have your hand up.
Yeah, you won't be able to answer the question at the time, but you may be able to point to some resources. And that is some of the best examples of lifelong intergenerational learning stories that brings this alive. Because that's what really pulls people in. Do you have that? Do you have such stories on your website or little video clips of people sharing their learning stories?
So there is going to be a whole documentation and processing where we really can share from the actual activation tour. What we do have is the 30 or 40 different presentations that people shared, and we kind of called it the Festival of What Works. But you can get a sampling of the quality and very powerful work that I think just even some of the people have been involved with. It's just, and it's such a wide range, from poetry to bioregional education to permaculture to different lessons of different places. And then what I will say is that the intergenerational learning aspect was one of the most important things, I think, to emerge in every different stop. And so one of our big focuses is also learning and playing with this idea of what is a bioregional learning center and what is a bioregional learning exchange, and then how can we be building in both place-based learning opportunities as well as creating resources kind of across that. And at each different stop, quite frequently, we would go talk with schools, teachers would invite us in, and the youth and the energization that they have is one of the biggest things that it really is. It's very powerful, and it's for younger people that we're doing this work, and so they need to be involved at every different level. And I think that there's also a lot of discussion around not just a one-way street of mentorship, but of Joe kind of talks about connecting broken legacy with broken futures, and then connecting it together, that there is learning that we can be doing together, and that we need to be, so that mentorship flows both ways.
Reciprocal mentorship.
Yeah.
I couldn't agree with you more. Absolutely. And also what I hear you describing is emancipation of human agency from a young age. So thank you.
Thank you.
Catherine, you get the last question.
Actually, it's not a question. I wanted to share a resource because the governance issue is so key. That GaiaNet is probably the most robust governance structure I've found for people just coming together and trying to figure it out. They have an incredible onboarding resource, lots of stuff that they've built out. So Dan Gorter is somebody I would suggest there to talk to. And I have got a interview with him on my YouTube channel under Inspiring Interviews that could give you a window into that. But I would really recommend him as a resource for governance.
Great. Well, lovely. And I just want to say thank you, everybody. And Dave, if it's helpful, I'm always happy to pop in, and people should please feel free to reach out anytime if you'd like to connect more. You can also go to regeneratecascadia.org. Yeah, we're around.
Thanks, Brandon. Man, this was really helpful.
Can you share your email or best way to connect with you? Thank you so much, everybody. Thanks, David.
Yeah, thanks, Mika. I'll post the recording to the Slack. It'll have the chat with it. Sometimes the chat notes will help you jump into the recording. And Brandon, I don't know if you're following the GRC Slack, but he is on it. So that's another channel.
Yes, and Slack's not in my normal repertoire, but I'll try to bring it in a bit more. And then I did share my email. So
just what we need is another standard. Thanks, everybody.
Yeah, it was really great. Thank you.
Yeah,
that was a good session, wasn't it? Yeah.
So practical. So many little gems. So many.